Welcome to the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast from Never Too Late Cafe. I'm your host, Laura Womack. Each week, we sit down for a chat with someone just like you, someone who had an idea, a passion, a dream, or sometimes just a thought, and planted that seed, watched it grow into something they wanted to share with the world. If you have an idea for a topic or someone that would be a guest for the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, where you can join our Never Too Late Cafe Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you. Good morning, and I have a very special guest with me today, and that's Megan Kennedy. So, good morning, Megan, and welcome.
Hello.
So, where do you currently live right now?
I'm out in McDermott, Ohio, just outside of Portsmouth.
Okay. Are you from the area originally?
I am not. I was born in upstate New York, but I grew up outside of Cincinnati in Loveland, Ohio. I ended up here. My husband's from here, so we ended up back here.
Well, we're going to get right into your story. So share with us what kind of art form that you do.
So I am primarily a caricature artist. So I draw people kind of in a cartoonish, exaggerated form. I work a lot in festivals, or I also do a lot of hourly gigs, so like weddings and parties and that kind of thing.
Well, that's cool. So let's go way back start telling your story about how you got involved in art in the first place.
So I've always been kind of an art kid. And when I was 17, where I grew up is right by Kings Island, the theme park. And one of my friends had gotten a summer job drawing caricatures there. And I thought, well, that would be kind of a fun thing to do. So I interviewed and had a portrait review, and then got a job and started training there. And I did that for a few years. So, and now I do it on my own. I have my own company. I still work with a lot of the original guys that I started with 19 years ago. They're still good friends and colleagues, and it was kind of a big life-changing event I could never have foreseen when I was 17 when I started doing this.
So they must have supported you and encouraged you way back.
Absolutely.
Some of your earlier colleagues.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough that they were all a couple years older than I was, but we were all pretty young at that point, and just so happened that they're some of the best in the industry, even to this day. So I was very lucky to just happen to be in that time and place. And yeah, so they all have different styles. So how I learned is just watching how one person draws, watching how another person draws, and then kind of playing around myself to figure out what works for me, and also how they interact with customers. Because what's interesting about what we do is that you're not just making a piece of art, you're interacting with that person, and the conversation kind of helps to dictate how the final product comes out, because you're trying to capture kind of somebody's essence, and you only have them for about 5 or 10 minutes. So just seeing how those guys, I was a very shy kid, and you can't really be that way to be a good caricature artist. So watching these guys, how they approach, whether it was a blunt way or how to banter, and definitely, those guys definitely helped me to not only become a better artist, and still do to this day, but also just how to interact with people in a not awkward way. Yeah.
Well, do you have like set questions that you ask, or is it spur of the moment?
Kind of. So it's a very flexible script. So like I usually ask if somebody's been drawn before. And then if they have, then kind of see where they got it at. And sometimes I can pick out there aren't that many caricature artists. There's a fair amount. It's a pretty small community, so usually you can figure out. A lot of times I know somebody who's drawn someone before, which is kind of fun. And then I can also kind of know what kind of style then to lean into. I also ask where they're from. It's always interesting to see like where are they from? Are they from outside where the festival is, or are they a local? And kind of the answers to that dictate where I'm going. If I'm drawing kids, I'll introduce myself, find out what their name is, just make them comfortable with me. So it's a flexible script. Some people you'll talk to and you'll find like immediately within 2 questions you'll know they don't really want to have a conversation. They just want to be drawn, and you can go give them that experience. Other people just want to talk, and I'll let them talk. So it depends. I do have like a few set questions, but the next question is the next question after that. I kind of decide from the answer for that. So just to see who they are as a person, and that influences my drawing. Yeah.
That's interesting. So if they say they've been drawn before and you know that person, do you try to be like that style or different than that style?
Not necessarily, because I do have my own style, but a lot of times I can tell certain artists are a little more exaggerated and a little more, and then certain artists are a little closer to what I would normally do. So it just gives me kind of an idea of usually how I can push it. Because a lot of times when people have been drawn multiple times, they like to take those pictures, like, and they even tell you, they're like, oh, it's really interesting to see different artists put, previous sketch up with your sketch afterwards and see what the differences are. So a lot of times people like that difference. That's actually a very common comment. So I don't necessarily, it just kind of, it helps me to get, if they really like to sketch by a certain person, it kind of gives me just an idea of where on the scale of exaggeration I should go with it, but it's not necessarily mimicking someone's style, if that makes sense.
So if someone said, I've never liked my nose, please don't make it gigantic or something, or I would probably say, make me just have one chin or something like that.
That's very common. It's very common, and I definitely won't over exaggerate. If someone is self-conscious and mentions that, I won't. But then sometimes, like, if people will be like, I know I have a gigantic nose, or sometimes people are just like, just destroy me. And you go and do that. But I am very conscious. I'm very conscious of how, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, so some people are like, just completely, just do your worst. And then some people are like, oh yeah, don't make like, right now it's really hot out. So everyone's like, don't make me sweaty, and don't make me,
I'd say that one too.
My nose big. That one too. So, and I do definitely take that into consideration.
No sweaty pics. So yeah. I know that you do, you said you do parties and weddings, and did people find you from your website or word of mouth, or how does that happen?
Both. So I do hand out a fair amount of business cards, and a lot of it is word of mouth, which is pretty cool. But when I'm out at events, I hand out business cards all the time. I have people come up and my radius is I have about a 2-hour radius. So sometimes I'm locally here in Portsmouth, but like this past weekend, I was actually a little farther. I was in Indiana, and next in 2 weeks, I'll be in outside of Cincinnati. So I'm kind of all over the place, passing out business cards. Uh, Sometimes I also get them. So some of this other caricature artists who I work with, a lot of times we have events where you need multiple artists too. So it's the other, or somebody is approached with an event and they are already booked. So then they'll pass it to you. So I get a lot that way too. There's kind of, it's almost like a guild system basically, where you, we all kind of work together that way. But the word of mouth is huge. I don't advertise. I don't have a Facebook. I have an Instagram, and I have a website. But yeah, I've always done pretty well with the word of mouth. And when I get one gig, usually, like there was a couple gigs I got this summer, and the one person had seen me at a county fair, hired me for one thing, and then the next weekend had passed my name on to another person in the area. So that, and then I've gotten a couple more from that. It's kind of a domino effect that way too.
Now, did I see that you have camped when you've gone to some of these events? Is that part
Sometimes,
of it?
yes.
Well, that's
sometimes,
cool.
yeah. Yeah, so I love camping. I live out by the forest, but I also enjoy camping. I was a Girl Scout for a long time and just love sleeping in a tent. So there's been a couple that when I'm near Cincinnati, my mom still lives there, so I often stay with her. But some of the other ones I'll get a campsite. There was one in Hocking Hills that I did recently. And my husband and my daughter came with me, and we camped for the weekend and just made a whole time of it. So
yeah, and that's a great place to do it. Yeah, Hocking Hills,
absolutely.
For anyone that doesn't know, is a great natural place with trails and caves and the water. It's just a wonderful place to visit. So when you have your different fairs, how do you know about where all your fairs are to go to? Was it just a Google search, or, I mean, you're on a circuit kind of?
Yeah, so I have this is the first year that I have done a full season, as in spring, summer, and fall. In the past, I had just done fall, and a lot of those events are events I've done for many years. So so this past year, the spring was kind of, I had to find some new stuff, and some of it came from when you're at other festivals. Other vendors will give you, say, hey, this is a really good thing. There's this music festival. Here's the contact for this festival, and that's helpful because they'll tell you like, oh, that festival is lucrative. This one's not. I did do a little Google searching this year to find some festivals, just to fill out the schedule. So, but now, like for next year, like I'm filling in for next year already, because I've been approached at other festivals like, hey, well, we do this festival in the spring, we do this. So I'm getting a pretty good, when I get a good event, I just plug it into the next year too. So yeah, vendors and a little bit of Google searching, and then some of them are through other caricature artists too. So,
well, it's great you have that connection where someone says, I'm booked, or I need another person, and that connection is very important. So, well, I think it's very interesting what you do, and maybe sometime I'll get brave enough to join one of your events and go, okay, do me. So on this podcast, it's called Bloom Where You're Planted. And actually, it started out with talking about people that moved into a local area that were not from that area. But then it's really evolved, because sometimes blooming is where you're at, where you've always lived at. So it's been a variety. And so I always ask people, what does that mean to them?
I think that it means no matter where you find yourself in life, uh, just making how you want your life to be, making that a reality. For example, I'm not from this area originally. I've been coming to this area for 13 years now and lived here for 3 now. But I've been able to start a business and I'm growing that business. And I do a fair amount. I'll be at River Days, the River Days Festival this weekend. I do a fair amount of local events and then again, about a 2-hour radius outside. So just, our area sometimes doesn't get the best reputation, which I get that from like friends who don't live here, and I say no, there's a lot of creative people, there is a lot of business opportunity. It might be you have to be a little more creative to make that happen, but I think saying bloom where you're planted is, well, this is where I am and this is where I want to be and this is how I make it happen here. And again, not being from here, I think that I have the outside perspective and I see a lot of people doing that here. And that's a part of the reason I really like this area and like to be based here, honestly.
So another thing is, you say it's a sort of a smaller world in what you do, and it's true. So what words of wisdom would you say to someone that wants to do what you do? It's not just your art, but you've made it, you've really grown it and you're expanding, you travel, all of that. How would you share words with someone that wants to do what you do?
If they've never done anything like this, apprenticing with someone would be huge. I think a lot. I wouldn't be where I am without the the connections that I've made, without the friendships that I still have to this day with people and who I can call and ask questions, right? About not necessarily the art, like the sketch part of it anymore. Although I'll watch a tutorial. A lot of those guys do stuff on YouTube and that kind of thing. But like tax questions, like all that fun stuff that, because we do the art thing and we travel, but the office stuff, like basically. So I think if somebody wanted to do this, since it's not just about the drawing and it is about the connection with the customer and the banter in a specific way, and what are there's a lot of pitfalls that you can avoid, I think, by talking to someone who's done it for a long time, because there's a lot of weird things in what we do, and a lot of tricks that you can, but I don't think that you'll get that. I've had people approach me in the past and say, how do you do what you do? I'm like, well, I could show you. I need an apprentice. I honestly have more gigs than I can handle right now, but and then they don't necessarily want to do, they just want to jump into it. I'm like, I don't know. I think that definitely the connections and the networking, especially because it is such an insular community too, to be successful at it, that's incredibly important for for I think all artists in general. The networking is incredibly important, but also specifically the caricature community. It's necessary for us. So.
Well, I think it's wonderful that besides just doing art, you are wanting to connect to people. Mm-hmm. And that probably is what's made you successful. So, and you said that you have more gigs than what you can do right now. And that's a wonderful thing to have in business.
Absolutely.
And on this, you will hear my barking dog. And I should just make it part of it, call it the barking dog We call him Bo, aka Barking Dog, Barking Bo. So, he did good for so long. So, well, I want to thank you for being a guest and sharing your unique talents and your unique way of doing them, and your words of wisdom and your sharing of the bloom where you're planted. I'm sure that someone somewhere will find those words very inspiring for them. So I thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, this is Laura Womack from Never Too Late Cafe from the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast saying bye for now.